my daughter blocked me on every platform, I thought she was just going through a phase. 3 years passed. Silence. No birthdays. No calls. I kept telling myself it was temporary, until I saw a wedding invitation. Not sent to me, her father, but to Mark, the man my ex-wife married after me. The envelope read, "To my father figure." I sat in my kitchen with that printed lie in my hands, reading it again and again like I'd misread it. But I hadn't. She had erased me completely. From her contacts, her memories, her life. And worse, she replaced me. I wasn't even worth a confrontation. Just deleted. What happened next forced me to reckon with every silent moment I thought didn't matter. The missed calls, the shrugged off birthdays, the "I'm too busy" texts. I realized she had every reason to block me, but I wasn't ready to give up. I didn't show up at her wedding with flowers or speeches. Instead, I mailed her a box, a small, quiet box that held 100 apologies. What she did with it, that changed everything. Before we get into this story of regret, rejection, and a father's reckoning, make sure to stay with me, because you won't want to miss how a single sentence almost rebuilt what years of silence tore down. I used to believe I was a good father. 62 years old now, living alone in a modest craftsman-style house in Portland, I had a quiet routine. Morning coffee by the window, an old photo album on the table, and silence that stretched like a second skin. In that silence, I convinced myself of many things. Chief among them, that I had been there. Maybe not in the loud, messy ways, but in the practical, consistent ones. I sent money, paid tuition, remembered Christmas. That had to count for something, didn't it? There's this photo I used to keep by the toaster. My daughter was 5. We were at a fair. She had cotton candy on her nose and was laughing. I was crouched beside her, my hand awkwardly holding hers. That picture gave me comfort. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't absent. But photos lie by omission. They don't show the day after, when I missed her kindergarten open house because of an emergency meeting in Chicago, or the voicemail she left on her 14th birthday that I never returned. "It's okay, Dad. I know you're busy," she'd said. I played that one back last week. Her voice cracked at the end. I'd never noticed that before. Back then, I didn't think missing one birthday mattered. I figured there'd be others. I didn't see it as a pattern. I saw it as life. Then came the silence. One morning, 3 years ago, I opened my phone to send her a text. Nothing elaborate, just a good morning. The message bounced back. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. Facebook, gone. Email, no reply. I thought it was a tech glitch. Maybe she lost her phone. Maybe she was just mad. Maybe I said something wrong. But I did nothing. I told myself, give her space. She'll come around. 1 week became a month, a year. By the second year, I stopped opening her old texts because it hurt too much to see the blue bubbles that never got a response. That was the beginning of the quietest war I'd ever been in, one where the front line was the absence of sound, and the wounds bled inward. The third year brought reflection. It happened on a Thursday, rain tapping the windows. I decided to clean out the storage chest beneath the bed. Found old calendars, emails I'd printed out. Don't ask me why I printed emails. Maybe it made the digital feel more real. There it was, an email from her 4 years ago. Subject line, "Can you talk?" I had never replied. Another, "I want to tell you something before I tell Mom." No response. A third, "I think I'm getting engaged." Nothing from me. Just White space, where a father's words should have been. Reading them felt like reading an obituary for a relationship I didn't realize had died. That's when I stopped calling myself a good father. It wasn't just the missed birthdays or the canceled weekends. It was the pattern, the expectation I had that she'd always wait, always forgive. That being her father gave me a lifetime subscription to her patience. I hadn't shown up, not really. I'd filled the fridge with groceries, but never asked what she wanted to eat. I gave her a roof, but never stood beneath it when it leaked. I used to call her silent stubbornness, but now it felt like a boundary I'd earned. 3 years is a long time. A lot can happen in 3 years. A baby can learn to speak. A student can finish college. A heart can harden into a wall no apology can scale. I sat at the kitchen table that night with a glass of scotch and no appetite. I opened my laptop and typed her name into the search bar, not to spy, but to remember. No new results. Just an old blog post she wrote in college about forgiveness. She quoted something. You don't always get closure. Sometimes you just accept the apology you never got. I didn't know if that was meant for me, but I felt it like a slap. So I stayed seated and reread every message I never answered. And that's when it hit me. Maybe she blocked me not out of rage, but out of mourning. You don't block strangers. You block someone who once meant something, someone who failed to mean enough. The thing about memory is, it doesn't ask for permission before flooding you. After I reread those unanswered emails, the past didn't just creep in. It crashed through. Not the proud moments. Not the big ones with cameras and suits. No, it was the moments I'd rather not remember. The cracks. The things I never thought mattered. Until now. The first wave hit with the image of a hotel room in Seoul 12 years ago. I was in South Korea for a last-minute engineering symposium, sipping bad coffee and reviewing slides when I got a text. Dad, are you joining us for dinner tonight? It's Mom's birthday. We're having cake. I remember looking at my phone, checking the time difference and thinking, I'll call tomorrow. I never did. Never explained. Never apologized. Just assumed birthdays were recurring. What's one missed dinner? Then there was her high school graduation. That one was supposed to be different. I planned the flight, bought the blazer, even wrote a little speech in my head. But the flight was delayed. Then there was traffic. I arrived an hour late, sweaty and breathless as they were wrapping up. I stood at the back of the auditorium, clapping with strangers. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she never let on. We took no photos. I told myself being there, technically, was enough. That was the lie I clung to. Years later, she called me once, late at night. I was mid-dinner, across the table from a woman I'd just started seeing. My phone buzzed. Her name flashed. I flipped it over. It's my daughter, I told the woman, laughing. Probably some drama with school or friends. The call went to voicemail. I never listened. I don't know what she wanted, but I do know what I chose. Convenience over connection. The worst was the last time she reached out before the silence. She was dating someone new, nervous about commitment. She asked me what I thought. I typed back 2 words. Your call. That was it. Nothing more. It felt neutral, wise even. Now it feels like I slammed a door she was too scared to knock on. I didn't see it then, but I was teaching her how little she should expect from me. 3 years of silence had made me numb. But memory has a way of lancing numbness like a needle to frozen skin. And just when I thought I'd reached the bottom of what regret could feel like, life twisted the knife. It was a Thursday, late October. I was grabbing groceries at Safeway when I ran into an old colleague of my ex-wife. Small talk turned to awkward smiles. Then she said, "You must be so excited for the wedding." I blinked. "What wedding?" Her eyes widened. "Oh, I assumed you knew. Your daughter's getting married next month." The world stopped. I don't remember what I said, if anything, just that I left the store without the eggs and drove straight home. I didn't believe her. I thought maybe it was a mistake. So I searched. Nothing came up. Her accounts were still locked to me, but people talk. The internet whispers. A week later, a photo surfaced on a mutual friend's Facebook page, tagged lightly, accidentally public, a picture of a wedding invitation, floral trim, elegant script. At the bottom, in delicate cursive, was this: "For my father figure, Mark." Mark? The man my ex-wife married after me. A stockbroker. Lived in Denver. Took her on ski trips and Napa weekends. Sent polite holiday cards. He'd been around, yes. But father figure? That title belonged to me, didn't it? I stared at the image for minutes, unblinking. Father figure. I mouthed the words like a curse. It wasn't just exclusion. It was replacement. Not even a ghost of acknowledgement. I wasn't invited. I wasn't mentioned. I didn't even exist. For a second, I wanted to scream, to call her, to drive to Denver and demand answers. But I couldn't. I was blocked, remember? Instead, I walked to the cabinet and pulled out that old photo, the one at the fair. Cotton candy on her nose. My hand holding hers. That photo used to comfort me. Now, it mocked me. Because what kind of father gets replaced and doesn't even know it? I spent the rest of the night with a bottle of scotch and the blinds drawn. Not in rage, but in something quieter, something deeper. Humiliation. I kept asking myself one question. What kind of man lets himself disappear from his own daughter's story? Me. That's who. I told myself I wasn't going to chase, that I'd respect her silence, let her live her life without intrusion. But the wedding changed that. Or maybe it just broke something inside me I'd been pretending was whole. I booked a flight to Denver. It wasn't planned. I didn't pack much. I didn't even call ahead. I just showed up at the front porch of my ex-wife's home, feeling like a trespasser in a life that had long moved on without me. She answered the door in a cardigan and bare feet. Her hair was grayer now, shorter, still sharp-eyed, still calm. She didn't look surprised. She just opened the door wider and said, "You want coffee?" We sat across from each other in the kitchen, a sunlit room filled with muted tones and curated comfort. I tried not to look at the pictures on the wall. Family vacations, smiling faces, pictures I wasn't in. "I heard about the wedding," I said finally. She didn't blink. Yes. She didn't invite me. No. There was no venom in her voice, no anger, no pity. Just fact. I tried to smile, but my mouth couldn't form the shape. Why? Why would she send the invitation to Mark and not me? She stirred her coffee slowly. Because she wanted it that way. I laughed bitterly. That's it? No explanation? No chance for me to fix things? "She's not asking you to fix anything," she said gently. "She's asking for distance." I stared at her, waiting for her to defend me, to say I deserved better. But she didn't. She just looked at me with eyes that had stopped expecting anything from me years ago. "She's angry," I said. "She's hurt," she corrected. "Anger fades. Hurt lingers." I felt it then, sharp and clean. The reality I'd tried to sidestep. I wasn't part of her family anymore. I hadn't been for a long time. They'd rebuilt a life, brick by brick, without me. I wasn't the foundation. I wasn't even a door they kept closed. I was outside the house, entirely. I left not long after. We didn't hug, didn't argue. It was like visiting an old address that no longer held your name. Back in Portland, I sat in my garage one night, engine off, doors closed, not in danger, but in thought. I asked myself the one question I had been avoiding for years. Why? Why did she push me out? Why was I so easy to replace? And in the silence, the answer came. Not in a flash, but in fragments. Because I had never really been there. I'd never hit her. I'd never screamed. I'd never been cruel. I told myself those things made me a decent father. But the truth? I had fathered from a distance. I had outsourced affection to holidays and gift cards. I thought my job was to provide, and that presence was optional. I thought being a father was something I could do on weekends, through calls I sometimes forgot to return. I thought she'd always understand, that she'd always forgive. But children don't run on logic. They run on love, on memory, on being seen. And I had made her invisible. The worst part was, I hadn't even realized it. I walked back inside, numb, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the drawer where I kept loose pens and unopened mail. Pulled out a yellow legal pad. I began to write. Dear Emily, I don't know where to begin. I stopped, scratched it out, started again. Emily, if this letter finds you. No. Again. No. I tore off the page. Started a third time. I kept writing and rewriting for an hour, each draft shorter than the last, each one ending in failure. Finally, I dropped the pen, folded the paper into a tight square, and threw it in the trash. Not because I gave up, but because I realized something else. I wasn't writing for her. I was writing for me, to feel like I was doing something. But doing something wasn't the same as facing something. I needed to face myself first. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of my bed, and closed my eyes. And in the quiet, I remembered a sound I hadn't heard in decades. Daddy! She had been 4, running across the lawn, arms flailing, crashing into my legs, knocking me off balance. I'd laughed, picked her up, swung her around. That moment, I had been her whole world. And then, slowly, I became background noise. I cried, quietly, not for pity, not out of guilt, but because I missed being needed. And I knew now that I hadn't earned that need back. Not yet. I didn't go to the wedding. There was a moment, fleeting, when I considered it. I pictured myself walking in, uninvited, offering a toast full of heartfelt apologies and fatherly love. But that fantasy evaporated quickly. That was about me, not her. That was about performance, not healing. So I didn't buy a plane ticket. I didn't rent a suit. Instead, I packed a box. It wasn't fancy, just a plain, wooden keepsake chest I found at a local artisan shop, the kind with a lockless lid and a soft pine scent. I lined the bottom with tissue paper and placed the first item carefully, a black and white photo of us at the beach. She was 6, sand on her knees, holding a plastic shovel. I was crouched beside her, wearing sunglasses, awkwardly smiling. I'd always thought it was cute. Now, it felt like an artifact from a civilization long gone. Next, I folded in a soft, faded handkerchief, white with pink embroidery. Her name was stitched in cursive, Emily Grace. It had been given to me by the hospital nurse the night she was born. I'd kept it in a drawer for over 30 years. I don't know why. Maybe because it reminded me of how perfect she looked that first moment. Eyes shut tight, mouth forming the first wail of someone who had no idea yet how complicated love could become. Finally, I placed the hardest thing of all. A leather-bound journal. On the cover, embossed in gold letters, were the words, 100 times I wasn't there. Inside, I had written them all. Not just the birthdays and graduations, but the little things too. The times she wanted help with her science project, and I told her to ask her mom. The field trips I couldn't chaperone. The emails I didn't answer. The night she called crying, and I ignored it because I was on a date. Every failure, every silence. Each entry ended with a sentence. If I could undo this, I would. But I can't. All I ask is a chance to say sorry in person someday. I didn't number them for drama. I numbered them for accountability. I wrapped the journal in brown paper, placed it beside the photo and the handkerchief, and sealed the box. No return address. Just a name. To Emily Grace, wedding delivery. Hold it venue. I mailed it express. Insured, tracked. I didn't expect a miracle. I didn't expect forgiveness. I just needed her to know that I finally saw what she'd been trying to show me for years. That love isn't just about being a provider. It's about being present. The wedding took place on a sunny afternoon in a vineyard outside Denver. I watched the forecast, imagined the ceremony, tried to picture what kind of dress she chose. I didn't look up photos, didn't ask anyone to send any. I waited by my phone, not for an invitation, not even a message, just anything. Days passed, then a week, nothing. Finally, I called the delivery service to confirm the box had arrived. The man on the line hesitated, then said, "The recipient asked us to hold it at the front desk. She didn't want it brought out during the event." I understood. The last thing anyone needs on their wedding day is a guilt bomb from a ghost of a father. "She said to leave it sealed," he added. "Said she'd open it when she was ready." That should have crushed me. But strangely, it didn't. Because I knew now that pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sets something down quietly and walks away. She hadn't rejected it. She hadn't sent it back. She'd chosen to hold it. And that was something. I sat on my porch that evening, drinking chamomile tea instead of scotch. It tasted weak and too honest, like my apologies. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. It was the first time in a long while I didn't feel like I had to earn forgiveness all at once. Sometimes, the act of admitting wrong, truthfully, vulnerably, was enough to begin. Then, 2 days later, I got a text message. It wasn't from her. It was from Mark. Yes, that Mark. It simply read, "She cried. That's all I can say." No preamble, no judgment, just that. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it about me again. But in that moment, I felt something shift. She cried, which meant she opened it, or at least looked at it, which meant, in some tiny tremoring way, she hadn't shut the door forever. Not yet. The message came on a Tuesday morning. My phone buzzed at 7:13 a.m., just as I was pouring water over ground coffee. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Not blocked, not labeled, just a sequence of digits that meant nothing until I saw the preview text. "If you still use this number, call me." No name. No punctuation. Just that. I stared at it, unsure if I was dreaming. I set the kettle down too fast. Water sloshed out onto the counter, burning my wrist, but I barely noticed. My hand trembled as I tapped the message open. I reread it 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. Could it be? After 3 years of silence, after the box, the journal, the wedding she didn't invite me to, and the tears I heard about only through someone else, it couldn't be her. It couldn't. But it was. I don't know how long I sat there, thumb hovering over the call button. It felt like hours. Part of me feared she'd changed her mind, that the message was a mistake, that I'd dial and hear nothing but a dead tone. But finally, I pressed the green icon. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I heard it. Hello? Her voice, cautious. I froze, my mouth dry, my body tense like a coiled spring. Emily? I whispered. There was a pause, a beat of breath. Hi. James. James. Not Dad, not even Father, just James. And yet, somehow, it didn't sting the way I thought it would, because it wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was neutral, like testing a door left unlocked. Thank you for the box, she said. The words landed like soft raindrops after a drought. Gentle, sparse, real. You read it? I asked carefully. I did. And? Another pause. I cried. My throat tightened, but I held it back. I didn't mean to. I never wanted to cause. I know, she interrupted, her tone still calm. I just wanted to say I got it, and I appreciate the honesty. We were quiet for a moment. Then, like easing into shallow water, she spoke again. I didn't block you because I hated you, she said. I just didn't know how to talk to you anymore. Every time we spoke, I felt like I was 13 again, trying to impress someone who barely noticed. Those words cut, but they were meant to. Not to hurt, but to reveal. I noticed, I said softly. I just didn't know how to show it. Or maybe I didn't try hard enough. She let out a breath, not quite a sigh. We talked for 15 minutes. Nothing dramatic. No apologies screamed or tears shed. No declarations of reconciliation. Instead, we traded memories. She asked if I remembered the time we made pancakes shaped like animals. I did. I asked if she remembered the silly pirate voice I used when reading bedtime stories. She did. It was like flipping through a photo album in reverse, backward in time, piece by piece. She didn't ask why I wasn't there for graduation or for her engagement. I didn't ask why she called Mark father figure. We stayed in the shallows, safe and slow. And somehow, that was enough. When the call neared its end, she said, I don't know what happens next. I'm not promising anything. I understand, I replied. I'm not asking for anything. Silence again. Then, Dad, she said it, soft, almost hesitant, like the word had grown foreign in her mouth. When I'm ready, I'll reach out again. Then she hung up, just like that. No goodbye, no promises, no conclusion. But I didn't need one. I sat in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, smiling like a fool. I didn't know what to call this moment. Progress, forgiveness, closure. It wasn't any of those things. But it was something. It was a crack in the door. It was a single ray through clouds. And sometimes, that's all a man needs. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood, the same path I'd walked hundreds of times before, past the library, the duck pond, the tiny cafe with overpriced scones. But everything looked different, not brighter, just clearer. I thought of all the times I'd tried to repair what I broke with money or advice or timing. None of it worked. But the box, my truth, ugly and raw, had found a way through, not because it was perfect, because it was honest. There's a kind of peace in being seen for who you really are, flaws and all, and still being given the faintest chance to stay in someone's life. That night, I wrote nothing. I didn't try another letter, didn't rehash the call. I just sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars reappear one by one. Some were faint, others flickered. But one thing I knew for sure. She said Bo, and that meant she hadn't forgotten who I was. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't punishing. It was space. Space she needed. Space I had to respect. I didn't call her again. Didn't text. Didn't press for a second conversation. I had learned, finally, that love, especially a broken kind, doesn't grow when it's crowded. It needs room, time, air. So I gave her all of that. In the meantime, I wrote. I started a memoir. I didn't call it that, of course. Too lofty, too self-important. But that's what it was. A document titled Things I Did and Things I Missed. Each chapter was a window into my failures, my absences, my good intentions that paved roads to nowhere. I wrote about the time I forgot her birthday, not because I didn't care, but because I thought an email counted. I wrote about the Father's Day she spent alone because I was too tired to fly. I wrote about choosing deadlines over dinners, calls over conversations, pride over presents. I didn't write for her. I wrote for me. And maybe, one day, for someone like me. That's when I started going to a support group. Every Thursday, in a church basement with a half-broken coffee machine and folding chairs that creaked, I sat in a circle with other fathers. Some had been divorced, some estranged, some just lost. We didn't trade tips. We didn't wallow in guilt. We told stories, honest ones. One night, a man named Carl broke down mid-sentence. He hadn't spoken to his daughter in 6 years. He'd tried once, sent a birthday card, never heard back. He kept the receipt to prove he mailed it, like proof would save him. After the meeting, I found him in the parking lot, staring at his steering wheel, like it might answer him. I sat in the passenger seat and told him about the box, the journal, the photo, the handkerchief. He didn't say anything for a while, just nodded. 2 months later, he handed me a sealed envelope. For her, he said. A week later, she replied. He showed me the text. It was 4 words. I got your letter. We sat in his car, windows fogged, neither of us speaking. And then I cried. Not because it was my story, but because it reminded me how many men out there were waiting for a door that no longer had a handle. We think fatherhood is something we do, but sometimes it's something we unlearn. I kept writing. And then, one day, I wrote something that wasn't for me. It was a letter, not to my daughter, but to fathers like me. To the father who thought being present meant paying the bills. To the man who chose the business trip over the bedtime story. To the guy who thought, you'll understand when you're older, was wisdom. To the man now, wondering why his daughter calls someone else Dad. You're not alone. I've been there. I am there. And I need you to know this before it's too late. Don't wait for a wedding invitation to figure out where you stand. Don't assume you'll get another chance. You might. You might not. But if you're lucky enough to still have a number that works, a mailbox that opens, or a memory they haven't locked away, knock. Even if the door stays closed, they'll hear it. Even if they never open it, they'll know you came. And sometimes, that's the beginning. Sometimes, that's everything. I printed 10 copies of that letter, left them in coffee shops, library bulletin boards, folded into the back pages of parenting books at the bookstore. Maybe they'd get read. Maybe not. But writing it helped. Months passed. Life moved in quiet rhythms. No new calls, no new texts. But that was okay. Until one morning, I checked my mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo. It was a wedding picture. Emily, in a satin gown, smiling, not at the camera, but at someone just off frame. Her husband, maybe. Maybe Mark. I wasn't in it. There was no note, no signature. But I recognized the handwriting on the back. It was hers. She'd written one word, thanks. No flourish, no explanation, just that. And somehow, that one word held more weight than any speech I could have given. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. A dot. An ending. Or maybe a beginning. I framed the photo, placed it on the mantle, and every time I passed it, I remembered what space looks like when it's honored, not forced. What love becomes when it's given room to breathe. Because sometimes the loudest reconciliation happens in whispers. And sometimes the only thing louder than I forgive you is the quiet act of being remembered.